Good morning, everyone. It's Charlie Craven here with Fly Fisherman Magazine, and today I'm going to tie for you my friend Lance Egan's new fly called a Poacher. And this fly is obviously tied on a jig hook, but when upside down, sort of resembles a leech. But really, when you talk to Lance and find out what his plan was when he built this fly, you'll find out that it's really a Sculpin. And as you kind of dig into it a little bit, it's pretty darn Sculpin-y. I am tying this on a new Dynaking Excalibur vise, which is honestly one of my favorite vices. It's got adjustments everywhere, none of which I can use while filming this video because I'll move the fly off the screen, but I'm going to show you as I go through here how to tie Lance's fly, and we'll maybe talk a little bit about the vise as we go. But full rotary vise as well, and actually works really nicely for giving you the full view all the way around. So without further ado, we're going to pull that one out of here, and we're going to put our hook in the vise. And what I've got here is an Umpqua X400 hook. This is a size 8. You could use a Hannock 400. A size 8 stout jig hook is what you're after. And a 4 or 4.5 millimeter black tungsten slotted bead. Depending on how heavy you want it. And generally speaking, you want these pretty heavy. So this is a 4.5 bead that I've got on there. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some 025 lead wire, and I'm going to wrap, I don't know, 8 or 10 turns. Yeah, we'll say 10 turns. And then I'm going to break that end off. And I'll break this back end off. And obviously you can weight this as heavily or as lightly as you like. Fold that end down. There we go. And then I'm just going to shove that up against the bead. Being that larger lead wire, it won't jam into the bead, but you can jam it right up against it. Now I'm going to come in with some 110 Denier Magpie Materials olive thread. Olive 6/0 uni will work here. Olive monocord would work here. I like a little bit heavier thread for the dubbing loop technique that we're about to do, just so I don't break the thread while I spin the loop up tight. And I'll load that up in my bobbin, and I'll start this thread just behind the lead wire. Get my jam knot on there and nick that end out of there. And then I'm not really going to cover this lead, but I just want to cross hatch it a few times just to anchor it in place. And I'll come down just slightly around the bend here and back up to the lead wraps. Once I get there, I have a beautiful squirrel strip here. This is a Sculpin olive pine squirrel strip, and I'm going to tie this. This fly, obviously, being on a jig hook, is going to ride upside down. So I'm going to tie this in first side down. I'm going to cut this in square, and I'm going to tie it in just behind the lead, with the skin side up, and I'm going to wrap down over it just around the bend. That's going to elevate the tail a bit. It'll help keep it from fouling quite so easily. And the ultimate length here is going to be about 2 hook shanks, 1.5 to 2 hook shanks. So I'll nip that off there. Maybe go a little shorter. Like so. Now, one thing that you can do now or later is we're going to bar that leather side of that squirrel strip. So I'm going to take a black Sharpie marker and just put some bars across that to model it up a bit. I'll turn that and show you. And then for the belly of the fly, again, keep in mind this rides upside down. For the belly of the fly, Sculpins have a pretty pearly little belly, and there's a lot of different materials you can use. On the fly I did in the magazine, I used Ripple Ice fiber, which is fairly coarse. Let's see, here's some Ripple Ice fiber. Fairly coarse, and this will work, but Ripple Ice hair, which is a longer, thinner fiber, would work better, or Ripple Ice dubbing, which is a thinner, shorter fiber. and this is mother of pearl color. So I've got ripple ice dubbing here, and what I'm going to do is kind of take this clump and tie it in at the center of its length here, and then fold it back over, and that just keeps it from pulling out. And one of the nice things with this is you can kind of tear it to length. So we just want sort of a little veil over the tail, and that's going to ultimately become the belly of the fly. So now what we're going to do is we're going to build a dubbing loop. So I'm going to pull out, I probably got a foot of thread here. So I'm making about a 6-inch dubbing loop. I actually don't need it that long, maybe 10 inches long. I'm going to cross around it and close that loop up, and then I'm going to wrap back over it just short of the tail, and I'll move the thread forward again. Now I like to latch this over my knob down here just to kind of keep that out of the way. And then for the body, this is Montana Fly Company Arizona Simi Seal dubbing. I don't know if you know, but Montana Fly bought Arizona Simi Seal from John Romer, and they are now producing and packaging and sending it all out, and they finally got it back up in production. Now when I talked to Lance about this fly, he likes the mega dubbing for this fly, only because the mega is the only one that comes in this dirty olive color. Let me get that up there where you can see it. There we go. Arizona Simi Seal Mega Dubbing in dirty olive. It's not that you need the length of the Mega Dubbing, which is just the same dubbing as the regular Simi Seal, but longer fibers. It's not that you need the length, but Lance really likes that color, this kind of dirty olive color. Now, that being said, you could tie your Sculpins with all sorts of different colored dubbing, and that's completely up to you. So if you've got some Simi Seal dubbing that's a shade of olive or brown or black, Lance does do this fly in black as well. If you've got some Simi Seal dubbing in a different color that's somewhere close to that, by all means use it. Now, because he doesn't need, or you don't need, that long extra length, you can see I took that clump and I just cut it in half. So one side of that's fairly square cut right now. And I'm going to take this clump and I'm going to put it in my dubbing loop and get it centered up here. Then I'm going to pinch the loop just below the dubbing, and I'll spin my dubbing whirl. And there's a lot of different dubbing whirls that you can use. This does happen to be a Dyna King dubbing whirl, which I've used for years and I really like. There's a million of them out there these days, and they all work. Same. They all do the same job, just go about it a little bit different way. So I'm going to spin that up, and then I'm going to kind of brush this dubbing out a bit. I want it fairly shaggy, like so. Now, one of the advantages of the rotary vise is if you sort of hold your thread out, you can rotate the vise back toward you. And this is the whole idea of a rotary vise. I'm not telling you anything new. This is just not something you usually see me do because I'm so used to a conventional vise. You can see how that dubbing will just feed right up the hook. And then when you get to the front, you're going to unwind those few turns that fed up and then tie that dubbing off with a few firm wraps of thread. So I'll come in and nip that remaining dubbing loop out of there. And I'll sweep that back just a bit. And I like to bring that dubbing right up to the bead. We are going to put a hackle collar on this. But it's not going to take much room, so we don't want to really allow for the room for it. We want to kind of jam right up close to it. Now, to build the head, this is in the tying process. This dubbing is sort of the body, but in the design process, this is the head of the Sculpin. Sculpin have a big, wide, flat head. So we're going to shag this dubbing out. And we're going to make this form the head. And I try to kind of brush it all. First I want to get it loose, and I'm using a stainless steel ripper brush here. First I want to get it loose, and then I want to kind of comb it all upwards. And from there, I'll take my scissors, and I'm going to cut at a steep angle in a wedge shape like so. And you can kind of shape that up a little bit. And then we can kind of flatten that back out. And that's going to form, I'll give you the side view here in just a second. A weird little strand up here. You can see how that made that head big and wide. So that's going to form the head of our fly, and you can sort of pick that out a little more if you like, kind of brush things out to the sides. That actually made that nice and pretty. You can see we've got a big, wide, flat head. So then finally we're going to take a hen feather, and this is a Coq de León hen saddle feather. This is from Whiting, and I think this is golden olive is what color this is. But again, whatever color you need. So you can use a CDL feather, or you can use a regular India hen feather. Any modeled soft hackle feather will work here, but these CDL feathers have really nice modeling, so I think that's what Lance uses on it as well. So what I've done here is I've prepped the base by just trimming some barbs off the base of the feather, and that's going to anchor this down here where I tie it in behind the bead. And I want to anchor that down good and tight, and then I'll use my hackle pliers to grab the tip of the feather, and I like to fold this feather back. Anytime I wrap a soft hackle, and really this is any time, I can't think of an instance where I wouldn't do this. I want to fold these fibers back to the back side of the stem, and then I'm just going to make just a couple turns, and you can see there's not much space to do it up here behind the bead, but we're just going to kind of jam those in. I'm going to come around and tie that off with a couple turns, and then I can trim that tip out. So now I'll use my brush again to sweep those fibers back. You can see how that's going to contribute to the head shape, but also imitate those big pectoral fins that a Sculpin has. That's the bottom view there. That's the top view on that side. Get them a little more square for you, but you can see that'll imitate those large pectoral fins. And then just as a final step, we're going to take just another tiny little pinch of that dubbing. And I use the other half of the piece that I cut. Just a tiny pinch of dubbing here. And I'm going to twist this onto the thread just to cover this thread collar. And it's pretty shaggy. I don't put it on terribly tightly. I'm going to dub that in just behind the bead. And then I'll come in and whip finish by letting my thread just roll off the back edge of that bead. Tighten that down and nip that thread out of there. Now, to make this fly ride flat on the bottom, what we're going to do now is we're going to pick up these hackle fibers on the bottom of the fly and trim them off. So we've got the exposed base here, making that flat belly, and then the pectoral fins on top. If I turn that around, you can get a little better idea, kind of sweep everything back again. And the reason I use the brush here, particularly on jig hooks, but I've just sort of gotten in the habit of doing this over the years. If you try to go in and do this with your fingers, at some point you will jam that very sharp hook point right into your fingertip. So you do however you want, but my finger is not bleeding right now, and that is a win. But that right there is Lance Egan's Poacher. He likes to fish this fly in a bunch of different ways. Under an indicator in a lake, he'll retrieve it in a lake. Tight line, Euro nymphing style, hopping a streamer along with a slow retrieve, just kind of a hopping jigging motion. This is a pretty small little streamer, but I see the application for this for sure. And every time I talk to Lance, he always gets me excited about his flies. He's always got such cool stuff. We tease each other endlessly. Everybody thinks we're not friends, but we actually are friends. And his stuff is always cool. So I'm always happy to do one of his flies, and you ought to be happy to fish them because that is an awfully good looking little Sculpin pattern. Let me pull this out of the vise so you can kind of get a view of the top of him. If I hold him real still, a view of the top of him and kind of get that profile that you're going to get out of that fly. Really in 3 or 4 simple steps. Just a cool little fly, really well designed. Does what it's supposed to do. That little pearly belly. Yeah, that's a good one. Y'all ought to tie some of those up, take them out and fish them, and then I'll put in the comments below, I'll put Lance's cell phone number, and you can call him and tell him how good it is. Or maybe mail him a letter, or maybe just stop by his house and knock on his door and tell him. Yeah, I think he'd like that. He's a fun guy. You'll enjoy him. Anyway, I'm Charlie Craven. That's Lance Egan's Poacher. Thanks for watching. You guys take care.